Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you a very quick but impactful way to edit an outdoor child portrait. This portrait was made during a workshop of mine in Virginia in 2019 before COVID. So this is my best friend's little grandson, Noah, and he's beautiful. So I shot this with my 85mm at f1.4 natural light. My shutter was 1/1000th of a second. So the first thing that I always do is come down into my mixer, and I love to change the greens to more of a yellow or warm color. I'm not a huge fan of green per se. So you can see if you pull your greens and your yellows drastically to the left, you're going to really impact those colors, right? Which is so much better than the green that we saw. Now, click on our luminance, and we're going to pull down the luminance in the yellows, and you can really see where the yellows are. And if you pull them up, what you want to do is just toggle between the two and see what looks better for the image. So I would say probably somewhere around -11, -10, something like that works good. I'm going to come back into my hue. I don't want the yellows to be quite so red. So somewhere around, just use your slider and go back and forth until you find somewhere that you think looks better. Now, saturation. Let's reduce those yellows. Let's reduce the oranges a little bit and the greens. Okay, and that's a pretty good start. Let's go back to our basic, pull the shadows up, pull the blacks up because they're a little clipped, something like that, and the highlights down too. I'm really looking at this ground. So what are we going to do? Let's go to our masking feature. Let's choose our background. And we're just going to see if perhaps reducing the exposure overall works. It does work for the ground, but see how clipped these blacks are here now? So that's not ideal. So what do? Well, let's go back to our main menu right here, and let's just open this as an object like I always do. And the reason for that is because the masking feature in this image doesn't necessarily work, right? So you're going to right click on this, you're going to choose new smart object via copy, you're going to reopen that second image back into Adobe Camera Raw. Now you're going to go to your masking feature, and we're going to click these three little dots, and we're going to invert the mask. And now we can pull down the exposure. Let's create a new mask. We're going to select the background and reduce the exposure. Right about there. Click OK. And now the beauty of doing smart objects via copy is that you can hold down your Alt or Option key, click your mask, and now you can apply that to various portions of your image. So right click, choose a soft brush, and let's just come in here and reduce the glare of this foreground. And all we're doing is masking that exposure that we just did onto the ground here. We can also come up and reduce the size of your brush and try and affect these other little highlights as well as the sky. Okay, something like that. And we're going to go to our properties and feather it out. If you don't have your properties in your layer palette, come up to Window and make sure properties is checked on. I drag it into my layers here so that I always have it readily available. Okay, now we're just going to go ahead and flatten this image. And now all we're going to do is add a new blank layer. We're going to sample one of these colors up here, and we're just going to paint over. You can see I'm at 100%, 100%, and we're just going to sample and paint over. I know a lot of people are afraid to do this. I'm reducing my flow to about 27, and I'm just painting over the blobs, because that's what they are, right? They're just blobs. And over the edges here. And then over the white here. And as it lightens, I sample that lighter color because it really helps me to blend everything together. Reduce. I just turned off my pressure sensitivity on my tablet, and I use a Zen's Labs tablet. I don't use Wacom anymore. If you want to know why, then you can comment below and I will let you know in another video. But I can tell you right now that I'm absolutely loving this over Wacom any day. So by doing this, all you're doing is you're adding softness and texture to this image, and you're kind of softening all of the hard dots and other situations that arise when you shoot wide open. I don't want this blob here. I'll probably grab my clone stamp and get rid of it this way. And that's better. Back to my brush. I'm going to sample this orangey color and paint it over here. It's all about just sampling colors, right? What about the black down here? Well, let's choose a green, not necessarily super dark, but all this will do is just kind of lighten those really dark shadows. I know for printing, you never want anything to be super black. You want them to be a little bit lighter. It just looks better on the final product of a print. I know a lot of people are afraid to just use a general paintbrush and paint over their images, but don't be afraid. It's very easy to do. Okay, and that's just using overpainting. And then if you wanted to, you could add another blank layer over top, grab a really light blue color and come over top and just paint a little bit of that blue onto the sky, like so. And that's pretty good. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and flatten let's crop this now. Now, if we're going on the rule of thirds, we would want his eyeballs to be right about there. And as we all know, we don't really want our image to be centered. It's always more interesting to have it either left or right justified. And that also makes the image look a little bit more at him and not at the whole environment factor, right? Go ahead and flatten. Now let's see if there's not a way for us to affect this again. So let's duplicate our layer. Let's go back into Filter, Adobe Camera Raw Filter. And let's go to our masking feature and let's select our background. And now let's reduce the exposure of that background. Something about right about there probably is good. Come up to our basic menu and we're going to go back to our color mixer, hue, and see if we can't change some of those reds to, or sorry, those yellows to a little bit redder. Like that looks good. Let's come to our basic, increase our shadows a bit, blacks a bit. And now let's actually, I think that's good. I think that's really good actually. His feet are a little blown out, but we'll fix those. Okay, so now he really stands out more, doesn't he? But we got to address the feet. So let's go adjustment layer, levels. Let's pull down those highlights on those feet. Invert to Command I, white brush, and now we're just going to paint that effect onto his cute little feeties because they're way too blown out. This is what happens when you shoot natural light. You don't have a lot of control over the brightness in a lot of places of the image when you use only natural light. So I'm just painting it over the bottom portion and also pieces of the tiled concrete floor, because why not? Before and after. Properties, mask, feather it out, and we're just going to reduce that a little bit. Right about there is good. Okay, go ahead and flatten. Perfect. Let's zoom into our little guy. First thing I see is this little pin, so we're going to duplicate our layer, grab our patch tool, and we're just going to get rid of that. Good enough. Look at that face, guys. Oh, he's so beautiful. He is amazing, isn't he? Amazing. Flatten. And I don't necessarily think that there's any skin softening to do to him, but there is some dodging and burning that could really make him look better. So dodge burn action, click play. You can get this in my store if you're interested. Flow down to 1, opacity at 100. Let's just zoom in. And now all we're going to do with this using 1% is we're just going to lighten some slight shadows. And enhance the shadows that are already there. This is an especially great technique when you're working with subjects that really need no skin softening whatsoever. But yeah, so that's the beauty of using your dodge burn curves adjustment layers, is if we look at the before and then the after, it's just nice to be able to affect the shadows without doing any skin retouching, right? Like, I mean, you could, but I don't really see a real big reason for it. And using this is really, it's really easy to do. You know what I mean? Just reduce the opacity a wee bit to get some of that definition back. Right about there. Okay. And we're going to do a exposure adjustment layer. So really increase it right to about there. And I'm only looking at the eyes, right? So invert that mask. Come back in to his cutie little eyes, about 5% flow. Reduce the size of your brush and just paint a little bit of exposure back into his eyes. And this is going to brighten up the highlights and the reflections in his eyes. Which is a bit much. Let's zoom out and then just reduce that opacity. Right, about 50% before and after. Flatten. And now what we're going to do is duplicate our layer. We're going to come into our select, filter, sharpen, unsharpen mask, and we're going to apply some contrast to just his face. And we're going to start with 20 amount and 20 radius. Click OK. Alter option mask, and all we're going to do is paint that effect with 100% flow just onto his little face. I'm going to try it on his hair too, because I think his hair could use a little bit of contrast. So something like that, and we're going to merge and flatten our layers, new layer, and go back to filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and this time instead of 20 we're going to do 10. And this time instead of on his whole face, we're just going to apply that to his eyes. And lips and the tip of his nose. Before and after. Flatten. How cute is this little boy? All right, now we're going to do a blank layer, change the blend mode to multiply, and we're going to go down into the reds here and choose a rosy color. We're going to reduce our flow to 15 or so, and we're just going to add a little bit of color to his cheeks. A little bit on his cheeks, a little bit on the tip of his nose, something like that. And now we're going to reduce our fill down to around 35. And it just adds a little bit of darkness to those cheeks, but now we'll add a blank layer over top, overlay blend mode, and this time we're going to change the color to a little less saturated. And now with overlay blend mode, just add a little bit of cheek color like this, and the tip of his nose again, and even to his lips. now same thing, reduce our flow all the way down. I'm going to add a little bit above his eyelid and underneath here. And reduce it. About 23. How's that looking? Okay, and then the last thing, two last things we're going to do. First, we're going to go to selective color, go to our blacks. We're going to add a little bit of blue and a little bit of cyan. Go to the neutrals. We're just going to brighten the neutrals just a smidge, add a little bit of yellow and a tiny touch of red. Go to our whites, and our whites are going to be more yellow, +5 in the yellow. Toggle your whites, just going to depend on how much rim light you want on his hair. Somewhere around +4. That's before, that's after. We're going to flatten it. Now we're quickly going to run it into exposure, duplicate our layer, filter, exposure, hold down your space bar, and that's going to show you what you've got. And this is the last filter that I used. I'm just going to reset it by clicking on the 3 lines beside the filter, layer, and reset layer. So that's reset. Now we can choose the filter. I really like this first one for more natural photographs. I'm also going to add a vignette right about there, but I'm going to change the location. So click your plus sign, and I really want the vignette to be applied to the majority of the left-hand side of the image, and just reduce it a little bit right about there. Now as far as the grain, because if we look close at this image, we'll see a significant amount of grain, right? So we want to reduce the roughness of that grain. Somewhere around there. Reduce the strength. I'm going to match all 3 shadow midtone highlights. Right about there is good. And we'll just sharpen this just a tiny bit. And that's good. Click apply. And this is what it looks like before and after. We're just going to reduce the opacity a tiny bit, right about there. And now we're going to go selection, selective color, and do a little bit more selective color. So -2 on the cyans, which takes us into the reds, and -4 on the yellow. Before and after, and that's it. I hope you enjoyed this. See you in the next video.